Hi everyone, hi seekers. Welcome to Not Your Typical Questions with Hashim. Today we are with Ami Garzitto. Very happy to be talking to you, Ami. Um, so you are in British Columbia at 7 a.m. right now.
That's correct.
So you are pretty early. I hope it would be a good beginning for the day. So Ami is a conflict alchemist. So from what I understood from that is you find conflict or crisis and then you turn this into something positive. So there's the resolution part of it, which is the obvious part, but then there's the added element of saying, well, when that happens, there's actually potential for something more positive than we had before. I remember there was like a saying or something like in Chinese that the word for opportunity and crisis is the same word or something like that.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you add? Yeah, so that was my impression of you in a nutshell, but feel free to add anything else or let me know how I did.
You did great. For me to add to that, I would just say that it's natural. It is a function of living, and it is the opportunity to expand our world, because every time we have a crisis, and conflicts are mini crisis, we have an opportunity to take care of something that is obstructing or making our world smaller. So the idea of alchemy for me is for us to think of our conflicts as a transformative product rather than something to be avoided, that is harmful, that in fact does the opposite of what we think it does. So for many, if I'm in constant conflict, it is a danger to relationship or connection. And in fact, one of my favorite definitions of conflict from Danon Perry is conflict is an opportunity for intimacy. So it's the opposite of what we think it is when we do it right. And that's the challenge, doing it right, doing it well.
Right. A question just popped into my mind before we head to the standard question, which is, are you, so different people have different kind of levels of tolerance or comfort with conflict. So do you think that you are by nature somebody who is comfortable with conflict, or do you feel very uneasy about it?
Oh, I'm the opposite. Essentially, I tell myself I spent a ton of money and education trying to teach myself how to get along. So I told you I'm Italian, and I joke, that it's death by pummeling, right? Is sort of your standard way of looking at it. And I wanted to find a different way. I wanted to find another way of, there had to be a way where we could all sit at the table and have our diverse opinions and still hold relationship. So that if I said something that was the opposite of your belief, that it might be difficult, but that I could find a way to manage that. So another way that I say it in my dissertation was, our table, that Italian table, is full of diversity. There's just an abundance of food, and nobody complains about the diversity on the table. Yet we struggle to have that same diversity with everyone sitting around it. And the idea is to try to find ways where we can sit at the table and hold that same diversity and celebrate it. I don't complain that there's green beans and pasta and meat at the table. And how can we do that with the people around in terms of our diversity of thought, and even have an opportunity to kind of think about things that are different and change our minds?
Right, right. Okay, since that's a question on the side, since you're Canadian Italian, do you think that the Italian pizza is way more superior than the North American pizza?
Oh, yes, that's a 100%. I
Right.
can't even, I mean, it's not even pizza. So,
Okay. Right,
sorry,
right.
I'm gonna be, so you might, yeah, I'm a total food and coffee snob. So
Right.
you can't even put that would be a tough sell to put on the table.
Right.
To put the Canadian pizza. That would be hard work for me.
Yeah. But there are actually people like, okay, since the topic is conflict, I'm going to start with a differing opinion. I actually went to, I went to Italy and went to Rome, and I had a pizza there, and I was like, nah, it's okay. It didn't really stand to the expectations of my fantasy. So
Right.
here's a conflict for you. What do you think of that?
Because, I mean, Italians can make bad pizza.
Okay, right. So you have to be really picky about where you
But,
get.
yeah, and I remember being at a stand in Italy at a beach and thinking, I'm not buying something here, it's going to be crap. And it was the outstanding. So it, like, for me, my sensibility was like in Italy, wherever I ate, even if it was fast food, it was exquisitely higher standard than the food that we had at home. So again, this could be my own cultural bias,
Right.
but it was a good pizza.
Right. Okay, so let's head to the standard questions.
Sure.
So feel free to answer either related to conflict alchemy or anything that kind of like,
Sure.
It's intentionally very broad, so feel free to say just whatever's on your mind. So tell me something you looked for, but either couldn't find or had a hard time finding, but you eventually found it.
Okay, so something that I'm looking for, that I'm still trying to find, and I hope this is going to answer the question, is I'm looking for places to work and places to hold my passion, to get to do the life work where everyone is trained to manage their own internal discomfort and then gets practice at doing that and then gets charged with the responsibility. So I'm looking for culture or spaces where it is my job to take care of my discomfort, so that if I'm feeling something that I don't like, I don't have to go to HR. I don't have to go up the food chain, or I don't have to leave, or I don't have to create chaos on social media in order to manage my internal nervous system. That's what I'm looking for.
I'd like
for that world.
I'd like you to elaborate more on what does this look like. Can you give me an example of a problem that a discomfort that arises, and how would you solve it rather than going to HR?
So for example, Dave and I are at a meeting and Dave keeps talking over me and I'm uncomfortable and I see the pattern and I'm angry. Rather than going to HR or avoiding Dave or talking smack about Dave, I go to Dave and I tell Dave, hey, Dave, I just, I need to chat with you here. Do you notice that every time I bring up an idea, you talk over me? This has been my experience. It happened here, here, and here, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. I feel this feels minimizing, and I'd like an opportunity I'd like to give you an opportunity to do that differently, because I'm not okay with it. My job, I don't have to worry about saying those words and getting my fingers slapped.
Right.
I in fact am in a culture that says, hey, if Dave is doing this, you need to approach Dave, and you're going to do it this way. And even if I get the training to do it this way and I do it badly, I can still make the mistake and try again.
Okay. And why do you, so I'm assuming you said you didn't find it yet.
No, I think we're going in the opposite direction, actually.
Okay. Why do you think that?
Because of the new, it's not new, but we're in a space right now where there are these increasing extremes of thought, right? And these increasing extremes of thought are actually freezing diversity, which is ironic because it's often in the name of diversity.
Right.
So in universities and schools, in education, as well as in corporate structures, there are less opportunities to have those conversations. And I'm going to give some concrete examples. So there was an experience that someone was talking about in a podcast where a man was standing up and just tucking his shirt as he got up, and another colleague saw that as a microaggression. And she couldn't, there was no space for the two of them to even approach each other. That individual went to HR to complain about the man tucking his shirt. Now, that's an extreme, but we are getting more and more uncomfortable having those different conversations, right? Like that diversity conversation. It's now sort of this farther extreme left and this extreme right pushing against each other. And the people in the middle are having less and less space to have those conversations. And that's the Canadian in me, because right. I'm a centrist. I think most of our work happens in the middle.
Yeah. What do you think of the DEI initiatives and roles and all of that stuff? That's the work that's
What's DEI? Sorry?
It's diversity, equity, inclusion.
And inclusion.
Yeah.
I think it is actually fostering some of the opposite of what it is intending to do. I think it's an extreme. How it's being rolled out is extreme. And I'm now speaking about education systems. I'm talking about universities. And just recently, I read a tweet about from someone who was studying the rise of the young conservative. And he was asking the young conservatives, how are you, like, when did you sort of make that switch? What was that moment? And the majority of them said it was their university experience.
Right.
So we're sort of breeding these two extremes and both of these extremes have no space for conversation. They have no space for, ironically, like I said, diversity of thought, of wondering out loud, even of research, right? So here are the facts about gender and children and transgender and children. And if those facts don't align with your way of thinking, then they attack the facts. So we have to find ways of having conversations, of being wrong. And those have to happen in the middle.
Right. So speaking of being wrong, tell me about something you changed your mind about, something that you had an opinion about and then turned out you switched.
There's so much. I can't, I mean, we just spoke about diversity. So I was raised in a very devout Catholic environment. And I was, in terms of my belief and my thoughts, and that has really shifted. And so in one of ways where I thought homosexuality was a sin, I no longer believe it's a sin.
Right.
So there's a biggie.
Right. Okay, so tell me about some hidden gems you discovered along your path in life.
Well, okay, and again, as it applies to what we're talking about, the hidden gems for me are it's just along this conflict and learning how to sit in the fire of discomfort. What I am learning is that when I am in conflict, my first thought is still, oh my goodness, I'm in danger. I need to run. I need to flee. And that I have to work against my own biology to be still. But when I do that work, when I'm actually practicing what I'm preaching and what I'm learning, it opens the door. It makes my world bigger and wider. So what I am learning is that when I work with conflict, that the gain is a bigger world, not a smaller one. But to get there, it is so fucking painful, if I may.
Right. So
it's hard to be vulnerable.
How did you kind of like come across the academic field of conflicts?
Yeah, I was a drama teacher. Right. I was a drama teacher, and somebody was teaching anti-bullying and for work, and they were doing it with a paper and like quiz. And instinctively, I knew that what I saw in my classroom with my students on stage was far more powerful than what was happening on paper and pen. And actually, while I was writing my master's major paper, which was on anti-bullying, Columbine was happening. And bold 92% on his anger management paper, right? Like, it is not about what happens in here in your brain. You know, we do the work with our bodies. So I knew there was something happening in my classroom, and that's what got me going. When feelings are in our bodies, feelings and what we do happen inside our internal nervous system. It's not a cognitive thought. And the research was just coming out about that at that time. And so that's what started the deep dive. Okay.
So curious, tell me a bit more about what was happening in your classroom, if that's okay.
Yeah, no. So like when a student or when anyone has the freedom of working with a character. I saw how much they were exposing and practicing and working on their vulnerabilities, their weak side, their stuff that really was holding them back or causing great suffering. I couldn't believe what they were saying out loud on stage in the very small guise of character. And it was very powerful. So that got me really thinking about our morality. How do we work? How do we change the way we think, what we do? And it became clear to me by what I was looking at that it was happening it was a physicalized experience. It wasn't a cognitive one.
So would you give them the script, or they would improvise? You just give them
They would improvise
basic sketch of the character, and they would,
right, you know, or we did a lot of work that was about giving them lots of latitude about what they could think about, and then you would see them give me all kinds of things that they were thinking about.
ooh,
in code.
right? Very interesting. So, but okay. So here's I'm thinking, like, how would you tease out what is part of the imagination and what reflects actual experience?
It's a repetition of it. It's the repetition of the story. So for example, what is the story that gets repeated over and over? What is the character the student brings every single time to the table?
Right.
And then as I understood this better, as I learned more about trauma-informed practice, as all this neuroplasticity and all this other research, interpersonal neurobiology, I understood what this was all about a little better. But at the time, I just intuitively knew that there was some kind of healing process happening, and there was some work that was far more transformative than getting the right answer to what you should and shouldn't do on a piece of paper.
Right. So you wouldn't discuss the actual, backstory with the child, or you wouldn't like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes, but really, I mean, at the time I was a drama teacher. Like now as a counselor, I think there would be another layer of that.
Right.
But, yeah, it is what started me on my journey. And in many ways, I still think that is part of my, like, I once a drama teacher, always a drama teacher. It informs my teaching. It informs my work tremendously.
Right. Okay, so let's do an exercise. Think of someone you do not like, right?
Okay.
Do you have that person in mind?
I do.
Okay. Now try to tell me all of the like positive things about that person.
Okay.
So I wanted to tell me like don't reverse the negative. Just tell me things that you think that are actually positive with that person, and try to kind of like paint the most positive picture of them using actual facts.
Okay, I can do that. They're hardworking.
Okay.
They love children. They are passionate about what they do. They are focused. And I believe they have the best interest of the child and the children that are in their care.
Okay. Now, let's take the negative things, and then feel free if you to mention the negative things or not. But I want you to tell me kind of like what was your initial explanation of where was this behavior coming from, and then some alternative explanations.
You mean initially, what was my experience of this person?
Not experience, your interpretation of.
Interpretation. Okay.
Yeah.
So my interpretation, that's a good question.
Right.
My interpretation was they're controlling. I have to do it their way. They haven't stopped to be curious about what I'm doing or to ask what I'm doing and if it's working. They just want to have me do what they're comfortable with.
Right, right. So what are some alternative explanations to this, for this interpretation?
Their experience is that this is the best way and that they're helping me to take a shortcut by having me switch to their method.
Okay, sounds good. I'm assuming since you're in conflict resolution that you've done this practice before.
Yes.
Did you think of that person in particular before, or is it the same?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Right, right,
No,
right.
I've, yeah.
So this is a pro exercise. Right, right, right. Okay, so tell me about your ideal working partner. How are they similar and different from you?
A working partner?
Ideal working partner.
So my contrast. So someone who is detail oriented, someone who is a compliment but not an exact, someone who is willing to do the work of calling me out on my shit and having the same willingness for and creating the same space for me to do the same with them. Somebody good with numbers, because I'm not good with numbers. So my compliment, but also my equal desire to do the hard work of staying in that muddy middle.
Right, right. Okay, so if you had the chance to facilitate a conversation between any two people in this world, who would you choose and what would you ask them?
If I could facilitate a conversation with two people?
With any two people in the world. So that you want to put like person A, person B, and then they have a conversation with each other.
You know, I would love to have a conversation with like Jesus and Buddha. I'd like to sit there and I would just want them, I would ask them to just share their points of view and then ask where are you the same and where are you different?
Right.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to watch that.
Yeah, I would, me too.
Okay. So now it's time to go to the custom questions. Give me a minute. Oh, there's actually one last question that I didn't ask in this section. I mean, obviously we don't know each other that much, but try to speculate or based on what our interaction so far. How are we similar and how are we different?
I'm going to say we are similar in that we are both curious.
Right.
And you're a very good listener. I'd like to think I am too. And I'm also going to say that we are similar because big ideas matter.
Right. I'm guessing you're a big fan of olive oil.
Of who?
Olive oil.
Who's
Olive
that?
oil.
Oh my God. Don't get me started.
Yeah, that's my my thingy. That's my jam.
Hmm.
So we have the olive oil connection, definitely.
Okay. Well, I can't believe I didn't start with that.
Right. So how are you different then?
How are we different? Well,
You can
that's so
speculate
interesting.
as
Why am I, just hang on a sec. I mean, yeah, our age. So like you're asking the questions from a younger standpoint. So that's how we're different.
okay.
With maybe less history, less baggage.
Right.
I'm going to probably say that you just and when I ask you my questions, it's your ability to take risks. You're much more of a risk taker. Like, what a great idea to have this kind of a podcast.
right.
So,
Yeah.
and in many ways, because it's so free flowing, it could go sideways
Right.
anyway, like pretty quick. And the willingness to take that risk in a public space. So that would be another place where I think we're different.
But tell me how, okay, so it's interesting. The way I see it, it's like there are different types of risks. So
Yeah.
certain risks I'm willing to take and certain risk I'm not. But in terms of the podcast, how do you, for me, here's the funny thing is that I think that the structure of this podcast, that there's questions that you kind of like jump to, it's actually a kind of a more of a provides me with more safety and comfort that
Right.
this, which is interesting that you saw that as a way of like, this is a risky format. So I find this very interesting, which is,
well, yeah, it's like it's your box, it's your container.
Right.
So it's like improv. So in theater, like improv looks hard. And I mean, it is hard and it's a huge skill. But every improv has what you just described, that box, that container.
Right.
So you've created, like you're essentially doing improv podcast style.
Right.
You've created a container to make it safe enough to create the unknowns. But every improv sketch does the same thing. There's boxes, containers, and rules, and then and then what happens.
Right. Okay.
And just in our small conversation, you use a lot of those rules.
Give me some examples.
You say yes. Like in improv, it's really important to say yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
so when somebody gives you an idea, it's called blocking. If someone says, oh my God, this is a beautiful beach. And if somebody says, no, it's not, we're in jail. You can't do that. Like it just totally, you've just lost all the juice. And you're a horrible, like you have to work with your partner. So every time I go with something, you say yes to it.
Right.
Quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's head to the custom questions.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me some memorable cases that you worked on or you witnessed in terms of conflict alchemy or crisis alchemy in general.
Yeah, and I have to be careful here because of confidentiality.
Sure.
But so I'll give you one. There was a client that I was working with for a long time, and this client was constantly in conflict with whoever their boss was.
Mm.
And again, this is the repetition. The story was repeated over and over again. And when I was able to build enough trust with the client, and we worked to see that this is the story of the client's relationship with their father.
Mm.
And they just kept repeating it over and over and over again. So once we were able to tackle the story of origin, the experience with the conflict with people in authority changed.
Right. So let's expand the horizon a bit. Say let's think of conflict resolution literature in general, or so you don't have to be personally like involved in it. But is there any kind of cases that strike you as exceptionally strange or funny, or there was a funny, odd way of resolving a conflict?
I can't think of anything.
Sure.
The story that comes up for me is I was working in an elementary school with a young boy who was really struggling with his feelings, and he punched out his best friend, and he was so mad. And I was looking at him and I was saying, look, you're having a big feeling, because and I was trying to explain to him, he left you out. He didn't want to play with you, and that hurt. And you are maybe feeling sad instead of mad that he didn't. And he was like too into his this big feeling, and he just went, that's right, and he got his fist out and tried to punch his friend again.
Wow.
when you're little, right, and it's so raw. But yeah, I just remember, I mean, that experience was personal for me, because I could feel his pain of just not wanting, love being, I could feel his hurt more than his anger. And because he's little, and because it's safe, like this was a very different experience. If that was a 30-year-old 300-pound guy, I would have had a very different experience of it.
Right.
But it was in front of the small being who was really just trying to figure it out.
Right. Why, I'm assuming you've got literature on this, but like, why do kids bully each other in the first place? I'm assuming there's different hypotheses. So is there anything that you had to grapple with this question?
Well, and I mean, kids, everyone does.
Right.
So it's not, we just talk about it as being bad and we want to fix it for kids, but we're doing it all the time everywhere, right, as adults, and modeling it and rewarding it. And then, so like I got issues with how we culturally say you have to stop bullying for kids, but right, we as adults get to do it all the time and win. But okay, so bullying, like for me, a lot of this is from an evolutionary biology lens. Threat, we still perceive threat as physical, no matter, even if it's internal or my feeling, or our biology still sees any kind of threat as something immediate and physical. Right. And so we behave that way. Dave keeps interjecting at the meeting. He hurts my feeling. My biology, my initial evolutionary biology is going to be, I want to hurt him back. We are wired that way. Every time we do conflict resolution, we are working against our biology. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is it's always about that social, I mean, the other element of that evolutionary biology is we're trying to gain social power, which historically from an evolutionary lens was huge. And so building, like making someone smaller, making yourself bigger means accessing more social power inside your tribe. So we're wired that way.
Right. Okay, let's talk about personalities a bit. Here's the Gallup. I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, the 34 strengths.
Oh yeah.
So I'm thinking of one of them is competition or people are like who love competition. And I'm thinking it's kind of hard to find win-win situations with those people who have high need for competition, because by definition, they want to win in a way that, in a ranked way. So how would you approach that? And like, if you're dealing with a client who has this competitive edge, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so that competitive edge, right, just didn't happen. It's taken years and years of training and possibly historical, right? So in terms of we pass down these traits and our trauma from our history as well. And we know, like, I mean, some of this newer research is around generational trauma or whatever. We're passing it down, not just by how we were raised, but in ourselves. So this very competitive guy or girl, that has to win at all costs. That is a long game strategy. And it is like the example I had with my client. It is, you're going to make small gains and over time build trust to get to some of those other grains. And that takes time. You know, you're not going to go like from a mediation, and usually that's at the very end of something, right? Somebody calls me to mediate when we're at the end most of the time. A committee is almost irreparable by the time they get somebody to come in. And so the gains that you're going to make are small.
Right.
That person who has to win is not going to be traditionally, I mean, it's not going to be happy, but it's not about whatever we're talking about in the mediation. It's a long game. This took years to happen, and it will take a long time to unpack, and it happens slowly, and then all at once, like crisis.
Right. So how, let's say you have an employee who has a problem with their boss.
Yeah.
When would you go to the conflict resolution path? And when would you say, like, you know what, to be honest, your best bet is to resign and find someone else? So
yeah. So that's interesting because okay, so I will get hired to help someone work through a conflict, and they're going to hire me when the stakes are high. So like you're a startup and you're having issues with your founder or your investor, you know, usually the stakes are high. So I will coach someone to, you know, with the words, with the language, we script it, we rehearse it, we work it out, and then we unpack it at the end. I can see that this isn't going to work. And I have learned that I don't say that anymore. I don't say, oh, it's not going to work. They need to come to that conclusion on their own. So I can lead them to the path. I can give them the material. I can give them best case scenarios or whatever we can practice. And often what happens is they do all these strategies, they go, they have the conversation, things get better. Things get better and they think, oh, this is great. And then 6 months down the road, it ends.
Right.
So, but they come to their own conclusion.
Right. Okay. But what are the what are the signs that tell you that this is a lost cause?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's the investment. Like so there's an energy investment. So sometimes someone is so bent on their point of view, their idea, there's no wiggle room, right? So for example, if I'm working with a nonprofit board, and I mean, nonprofit boards are interesting because they're often paid very little or not at all. So there's other things that they're invested in. And sometimes there's somebody on the board who is heavily invested in sabotage and is unwilling, like there's just no place to unwiggle, or it's just going to take too much time. You know, that's a problem.
Heavily invested in sabotage, you mean it's in
the organization or they're personally invested in that sabotage. So it's that control of making things not work.
Because it's in their advantage.
In their point, in their mindset, right? So they, you know, in their family, they were the saboteur, and that's what they're used to, gaining control and power. And they bring that story into that nonprofit, and they're unwilling, you know, there's no wiggle room to change that story.
Right. So
that's part of it, the lack of willingness, that I'm stuck in this position. My only way of finding a solution is for everybody else to get unstuck from their position.
Right. Is this question just jumped in? Do you see there's like a parallel between, how do you see the parallel between conflict in work and kind of romantic conflict
at home or in relationships?
Couples, yeah.
Well, completely different and exactly the same. So sometimes you'll see the CEO behave radically different in two environments. He's or she is very powerful and domineering in the workplace, and then is the opposite at home. More often, the behavior looks the opposite, but the mechanism driving it is the same. So in those cases, again, it takes time. Nothing happens fast. There's no quick solution. It's building trust. It's asking good questions. It's helping the individual see their own damage. And then if there's a willingness to unwiggle their story, then there's room for hope. But if they're not yet, if they have to keep that story at all costs, they're not ready yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So the other place where it's a problem is when the person that's creating all the chaos is the owner, right? So if the person that everyone keeps
trying to please,
leaving the organization or whatever, but it's the person who's the owner who holds all the power and is unwilling to change. So then all you're doing is you're coming in and you're making cosmetic changes.
Right.
right? Until that owner is is willing to wiggle out of that story, you're spending somebody's money,
Right.
really.
Right. Okay, let's talk about me. Let's talk about my damage. I'll give you an example of a conflict resolution or conflict resolution technique that I used, and tell me if you've heard something like this before, or what your thoughts on, about it. So I had like a friend who we had some problems, then we ended up like cutting off the relationship, and I kept ruminating about her and the relationship. So after I don't know how many months, I ended up writing 22 pages Microsoft Word, 22 pages of like my feelings and analysis of the situation and the reasons why we got and blah blah blah. And it was very analytical at the same, like emotional and analytical at the same time. And there was like videos in it and references and
wow.
Yeah. So my first question is, have when I talk to people about this, their initial response is like, I've never heard of something like this. So have you heard of something like this? And where do you think, speculate in terms of like, where do you think this is coming from?
Well, I'm going to need more information, but I'm going to give you some guesses.
Right. Yeah.
So, yes, I hear of people who write things down. I haven't heard about the videos. I think that's interesting. But so my guess is that that's, like you use the word analytical, it's cerebral, it's cognitive. And what I would be curious about is looking at that document, where are the feelings?
Right.
And where is it uncovering that expression, those felt experiences? Because those would be the clues of what is happening underneath. The fact that it's 22 pages tells me there is a ton of connection, right? The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy.
Right.
Not caring. So this is someone that you have invested a great deal with, and you care a lot about. Like if that was a client, that would be an incredibly great sign for me, right? And saying that there's something there. But the most valuable piece is that conflict alchemy space. It's, what is this saying about me, right? Where is my edge? This 22-page story that I have written is pointing to those edges, those wounds that are longing to break out into a bigger box. And so that's what would be the work, is finding those painful spots, those edges that are there in the felt experience.
Right.
And then inviting those edges to come forward. Because as soon as that happens, as soon as you make that shift, your relationship with that person changes.
Right.
Because you are no longer asking that person to be in your container anymore. Your container's just exploded. And sometimes that will scare that person, and sometimes that will expand.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about mediators. So what do you think a person who works as a mediator has to have above average quality of their own personal relationships, or is it irrelevant?
For me, mediation is math almost, right? There's a science to it. There's a process. Mediation happens when people are on the, just again, at the edge of their experience. And what you're looking for is interests. You're looking for places where there's wiggle room and where you can create consensus. I think you could be a great mediator and still not be great with conflict yourself. I think you can be completely devoid of your own experience because of the math part, like the functional, this, then this, then this. I think so you need to be a really good listener. You need to also have some incredible skill at finding common ground and hearing those places where both parties are willing to make a change.
Right. Are you like this phenomenon fascinates me of relationship coaches, trainers who have themselves not that great relationships, and I've been struggling trying to see what I make of it. Does that mean, on the one hand, yeah, it's as you said, there's the math part, and that they're kind of like a external agent to the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, I'm like, there's this kind of, what's the word, gut reaction, that there's something odd about this. So I don't know, it's not even a question, it's just like,
right. So I'm if I can, it's the incongruence.
Yes, like
right?
I guess what's going in the mind of any skeptic is, well, if this field is really helpful, then you should have helped yourself.
So that's a difference for me between mediation and what I call conflict alchemy. And that is why I'm interested in that conflict alchemy side. Conflict alchemy is about, and there's that Canadian in me, that middle. It's the practice. It's, hey, this is I'm expecting my company, my organization expects me to take ownership. And the difference is conflict alchemy requires you to manage your internal discomfort. It's a requirement. Mediation is all about your externals. It's about what's on the table, what are the outcomes, how do we manage those pieces? It's very different in my view.
Okay,
right?
So would you say that your I'm not sure if personal relationships is the right word, or your professional relationships, or they have an above average quality?
100%.
Okay.
Like 100%. This is, and again, that's the alchemy part, because it transforms, right? So the idea for me is you're not going to like everybody. Some people are just, and it's not about just having it out with people at all the time, or if somebody hurt your feelings that you're going to have a conflict resolution. It's not that. It's it's about like understanding, number one, that everything that is happening has an internal mechanism, and it's my feeling, it's my job. Not, like that's key. And so that there's a responsibility. It's the opposite of being a victim, which I find so dangerous. I find this culture of victim and what we're doing right now in terms of honoring who's got the biggest slight is the winner here, is so dangerous for that person, because what we're doing is we're reinforcing smallness rather than reinforcing strength. I'm giving that power away. If I'm a victim, I'm giving that power away rather than, somebody just did something that's totally inappropriate. And they could have done it because they have all this entitlement, because the culture is entitling them. All of that could be true, but I have a responsibility to my body to do something. And that is key.
Right. Okay, I want to talk about something that you, in one of your articles, the idea of stillness.
Paradox of stillness.
Yeah, the paradox of stillness. I encountered something, or have been struggling with something similar, which is the difference between depression and burnout. So what I mean is that the symptoms of depression and burnout are very similar, but there are sometimes conflicting remedies. So if somebody has burnout, then rest would be like the remedy. But if you are stillness would be the remedy. Let's say if you are depressed, then a lot of the times the recommendation is to like try to work as much as possible so that you can get yourself out of this depression. And I was like, but I don't know if I have depression, or I don't know if I have depression or burnout to begin with. Like, I don't know. I'm having the same symptoms of like, you know, lack of, or like I'm down and I don't have much desire to do things, blah, 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 blah. But it could be this or it could be that. So I don't know if the solution is to be still or to move. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I'm going to ask you some questions. What difference does it make if it's burnout or depression? What would you do differently?
That's the main thing is if it's burnout, then the solution is stillness and relaxation.
How do you know?
How do I know what?
How do you know that the solution is stillness if you've got burnout?
That's kind of like what's the word? The common wisdom, or
so the common sense is you're doing too much, you got to slow down.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So, I mean, another way to look at it is it doesn't matter what the word is. You're having, and to focus on, like, that's the analysis. This is what I have. The other way to look at it is, this is what I feel. This is what I feel. And to just sit with that for a second. And I mean, the work, if I'm working with a client and that's what we're talking about, it would be, okay, let's sit with the feeling and let's work backwards, right? Rather than try to pathologize it, put the word or the label on, and work from here to work from here. Because we'll move faster, we'll get to the solution faster, because our feeling brain evolved before our cognitive brain did. feelings are enormously powerful in our survival. We conserve them, right? Anything that our bodies conserved served us big time. And so our work is to become masters at working on what's happening here in our bodies, and then to take care of that. So, for example, if you call it burnout, I mean, burnout could be a signal you're doing the wrong thing. Could be your body is desperately telling you you need to turn left and you're going straight. That could be one of the things. Burnout could be grief. You haven't stopped to properly grieve for a broken relationship, a broken project. Doesn't, you know, so any of these words can be many things. And it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter. You go here, figure out what you're feeling. What's it pointing to? Let's address that. And then give you tools to manage it so that you become much better at navigating your own internal nervous system. Become good at acknowledging that vulnerable, that weak space, because that will ultimately make you so much more powerful. Every time you take care of that weak space, you become impermeable in that sense that people have, when you become aware of it, others, when others poke at it, you're sitting still in the fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a sec, give me a second to, right. So I'm interested in the idea of partnerships. The biggest problems that comes with partnership is the idea of conflict. So how would you filter out bad combinations or partnerships to begin with? Like, how do you, when you think of a partnership between companies or what any kind of two relationships, what do you think like are things that tell you this is not going to work?
Well, partnerships, I mean, I think there's a lot there. I think the entrance is really important. So entrances and exits. So you should be clear about an exit as part of your entrance strategy. So I think the setup is everything.
Right.
So I would spend a lot of time working on the setup.
Okay.
That's one thing. And then I would include pre-mortems, right? So a pre-mortem is what happens when everything, you know, fucks up. Right. What happens when shit hits the fan? What are we, you know, the strategy? So your setup, the beginning, should have some clear exit strategies and pre-mortems.
Okay.
Right. So that's what I would say about a startup, right? Or the beginning of a partnership. It's interesting because now if I say this about romantic or relationships, it's different because you get time. You get time, and it would be take your time to really connect, to listen, and to bring your body into the relationship. And what I mean by that is your body has all kinds of signals, and we often circumvent those signals, right? Our head will say no, 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 or yes, 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 for all kinds of reasons. But the biggest advice I would give in terms of relationships is bring your body to the to every connection and experience and notice what your body's doing. Keep checking in. Whereas when it comes to money and partnership, I'd say make sure that you are super clear about all your exits and all your and do some pre-mortem work right off the get-go.
Okay. Let's talk about more in terms of like workplace culture, a healthy workplace culture. So there's literature to the effect that there has to be some sort of psychological safety for the employees in order to be creative. You know, if the model is if you screw up, then you're out, this will make people afraid, and fear and creativity do not go along with each other. The question is, how do you balance between creating a culture that is that creates this psychological safety, but at the same time has accountability?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's safe enough to be dangerous. That's what you're looking for. And really, I mean, in my view, that should be everywhere. We should be making schools that are safe enough to be dangerous, homes and communities safe enough to be dangerous, and workplaces that are safe enough to be dangerous. And that's a moving target. But that psychological safety piece is key. And then it's like, for me, what I always think about is Vygotsky +1. You want to always create a little bit of tension. It can't be safe. Does not mean relaxed. Safe means I get to make mistakes, learn from them, be accountable to them, and move forward. Right? That's safety. And safety also means that if my colleague harms me repeatedly, that there's accountability, right? That the culture is gonna push at things that are not okay. And what's not okay is, in terms of psychological safety, is are there forms of equity? Does what I say matter as much as so and so and so and so? And that, again, is a moving target. If I'm talking about conflict, the weight of what I say should matter more than when I talk about finances.
Yeah.
Right. And those two things are going to be at the table, and they're going to have competing interests. And that's great. They should be rubbing on each other.
Right, right. Okay, I want to pick on something that you mentioned in, again, one of your articles on the issue of addictions. That
Yes.
And I was thinking that and you see how it's the addictions are kind of like temporary solutions, but the not addictions, the compulsion is a temporary solution, but it festers on. And I was thinking of the issue of the solution of retreats, because I'm having like a bit of a digital addiction, like emails and all of that stuff. So I'm thinking like I really want to go to somewhere where I don't even have access to these things. But my fear is that when I come back, then I'll have all the stimuli come back again. So yeah, just give me your free-flowing thoughts about retreats and how they work, and do you recommend them?
Right. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to give you my free-flowing thoughts. First of all, I mean, this is a huge issue. people have done some work on it, and I'm just talking about digital addiction in particular. So any addiction works because we already have that chemical ping in our body already. So digital addictions are like small drips of dopamine and serotonin, right? And if we keep using it, right, part of the issue is our body stops producing it, right? Because we're getting it all the time and it sort of becomes desensitized, so that when we stop doing it, then we're at a big deficit. And then, our nervous systems are really struggling because we don't have enough of our own chemicals that create natural equilibrium. A retreat is like a reset, right? To kind of restore some of that equilibrium. But all of our external outputs are everywhere. It's like an alcoholic living in a liquor store. I mean, our culture is just, it's all about that. And so it is about creating boxes of time. So to your point, that's what I think a retreat does. A retreat, like a detox of anything, helps restore that chemical balance. The cultural piece is much harder. And what our brain needs is like long-term thinking. So it needs time where we have one focused thinking for a longer period of time. Like what you and I are doing right now, we've spent like an hour and a half talking and pretty much focusing on each other. Our brain needs these kinds of opportunities where we're not scrolling, doing this, doing that, doing this, doing that. We need to be able to spend time every day doing one thing only.
Right.
Yeah. So part of when you come back from the retreat is creating really firm boxes. And what I do with clients is, we set it up for success. So for example, it used to be that my best box, and when I was writing my book, was early morning. So I made my early morning my box for working on my book. And I just uni-focused it. I just got up, got my coffee, and then no email, no nothing, just the book. And so it's about finding when your space of best focus is, and then keeping it sacred.
Okay. Yeah. I want to end so this is my last question, and then I'll give you the opportunity to ask me a question. Sorry, that came out. I'll give you the opportunity to give you.
That's okay. Like no, it's all good.
Yeah. I give you the opportunity. Sounded very narcissistic. So yeah, this is again very free flowing. I'm just there's a thought that is kind of like controlling me, and an idea that's just keep thinking about it, and I want to tell you about it. And I think there is, when I was reading about the idea of stillness and how your sister broke her the injury. So perhaps you can tell us your sister's story quickly, and then I'll tell you, I'll tell you what I have in mind, and then how we can connect them with each other.
This is the one where my sister broke her, was getting ready to go into the Masters Olympics for badminton. She was just getting back into her passion, all excited, and then she had a really serious knee injury. She's still really not recovered. And as a result, she went from, just doing really well, getting seated, to not, like, just struggling to walk.
Right.
And so it was a complete right hand turn from where she was going, following her passion, to not. So is this what you want me to talk about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my idea is that I've been thinking about, that when I have these like intense, or not intense, okay, when I have these times in my life where like my motivation is very low, and I can't like get myself to do the things that I need to do, or the tasks. I'm thinking of the idea of word association, or a stream of consciousness, is that we always, regardless of how tired you are, regardless of how knackered and overwhelmed you are, if I ask you, what is the word that is in your mind right now, there is a chance, you can give me a word. Usually you can give me, okay, this word. And then I'm thinking, and this is very useful because it's something that's hard to fake, and it's something that's in your mind. But the thing that I'm trying to think of, like, okay, how can we use this idea of word association to be productive in states where we can't do anything, or we're very tired, or we're bedridden, or whatever. So yeah, so this is not really a question, it's just me throwing stuff on the wall and see what's going to, and I invite you to throw some things on the wall as well.
Okay, what I'm gonna throw on the wall again is back to like a couple of things here. Like, some of this, what you're talking about, is just the biology, right? So if you are, I mean, and this is all of us to some degree or another, is that digital, if we're constantly in this space, it tends to be sedentary. It's very hard on our nervous system. So part of the solution is to build in movement, like, and that's kind of like the changing of the state. Because most people, when I say change your state, it automatically means movement, right? So again, also work with children, and parents will just be struggling with their kids' screen time, and yet they're glued to their screens. So the work is about building that whole community structure of screen-free time,
Right.
and doing the work with the kids. But it's all, it ends up being move, just get out of the house, go for a walk around the block, ride your bike. Like, it's all about movement. And that's huge, because our brain, again, our brain evolved moving. So our nervous systems evolved in movement and being outside. So we need to put that back in. So part of this is about putting back in what we're taking out when we're on our screens. So part of this is just biology.
Right.
Think about like redeploying all those things your brain and nervous system need to function properly. The other piece that there's a growing body of research around is nutrition, especially carbs. And so I know this is, people dismiss this, but there's evidence now that children are getting, like, well, first of all, that diabetes like affects inflammation, but it's in the brain as well. We just think it's in our body, but we're talking about inflammation of our brain. So our bodies ate protein and fat when our brain was growing, and protein and fat are things we need. So that helps build our nervous system as well. So some of this is pure like functioning.
Right.
Some of these strategies are, you just need to, but they're huge.
Yeah.
Like some people shift just by doing that. And then the other thing is you got to train your, like, this is that whole internal nervous system. We have to train our bodies and our brains to do our own work. So I'm feeling anxious. I have anxiety. What are the strategies that I need to do to manage that?
Right.
I'm going to add just one piece to that. That is a growing part of my work these days, especially after COVID. My work is growing in the sense that what the concerns are mental health, our growing inability to take care of our nervous system or to even recognize it. And that is number one. If you can't do that, you can't solve conflict. If you can't work on that nervous system if you're not even aware of it, you can't repair a relationship. That has to happen first.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So now it's your turn. The opportunity. So
here's what I'm so curious. I wanted to ask it first, but what drove you to start this podcast in its form, in the form that you have?
Okay, sure. Okay. I'm adjusting my seat because already I wrote about this, so I have a lot of material to say. But yeah, so basically it grew out of my natural way of interacting with people. So I became known as the guy who asks random weird questions in my social circles and my work and whatever. Which is interesting because growing up, I was shy, and yeah, I was shy, and throughout my life, I had kind of very different perceptions of people looking at me. So some people would find me as extremely introverted or very introverted, and other people I would find me as extroverted, very extroverted. So the way I kind of analyzed it later on is that the way I didn't engage in a lot of like this small talk, not because I don't like talking or communicating with people, is that I found it very surface level, and I found it very kind of ritualistic, which is going through the motions. So I just didn't like this attitude, this kind of paying lip service to the actual conversation. So that's why I didn't kind of like engage in a lot of talking with people. But then I started thinking to myself, why don't I just ask the questions that are already here in my head and I'm curious about, instead of like, hey, how are you doing? How's the weather? Blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I started just like asking people whatever is on my mind. And yeah, I'm someone who's by nature, I have like lots of bubbling questions in my head. So I just started to empty those thoughts, and I got positive feedback from people. So like, okay, let's turn this into podcast. Let's connect for my because the relationship building is a big part of my work. So let's turn this into a podcast. People who interest me in some way or another, like instead of like, hey, how can we collaborate with each other? Let's have a talk and see how it goes. Yeah, so that's how it came about.
And what is one nugget that you have learned? And I know this is early on, right? Because it's your how many podcasts have you put together so far?
It's about 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, because I could only find what you had on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll send you the link for the YouTube. And
Okay.
for the LinkedIn was just
Okay.
one post of
Yeah.
batch, but about 40.
Yeah.
I'll send you
That's great.
yeah. So yeah, that's me. You wanted to ask something else? It's usually one question, but sure, go ask one question.
Well, yeah, I'm just mindful of my time.
Yeah,
so
sure,
I
sure.
have to head, but I've really enjoyed just your thoughtfulness. You've got some great, I just appreciate how, my sense is it's like life is important to you.
Right. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we can keep in touch.
Yes, thank you.